Ron Toy with the Ron Toy team, Cross Country Mortgage, doing my Monday mortgage market update today. And this week is going to be a very important week. The Fed makes their Fed fund rate decision on the 18th. I've got a huge event on Saturday, a housewarming party for a client I recently closed with their agent. We're going to do a housewarming party for them. So excited. Lots going on. Last week's event was phenomenal. We had the previous CEO of 7-Eleven, as well as the previous CEO of Blockbuster, out to speak at our event. And it was just amazing to hear from somebody who has that level of experience, being the CEO of Fortune 500 companies and what went into that, and kind of some of the behind the scenes on the exit from those businesses. So it's huge. I'm always looking for opportunities to add values to the agents and clients that I work with. So part of that is doing these types of networking events and whatever. But this week, want to go over the market, what to expect, answer some questions on this live, and give some tips and tricks on fellow loan officers and realtors on what they should be doing this week to make sure that they're staying ahead of these important decisions coming out from the Fed. So let me pull up some of the slides on the background. Take me a second. Let's see. All right. So first and foremost, let's go ahead and pull up where we're at currently. All right, so I'm going to move my fat head out the way so you can screenshot this. This is showing you where we are right now, the bond market. I'm going to point out what questions to ask when you're shopping rate, because this is super important. So let me get out the way so you can screenshot this. Okay, what we're looking at, the UMBS 30-year 5.5%. That's the coupon that everybody's pretty much trading off of. There's several others, but just so you are aware, we're at 101.57, up 6 basis points. Why this is important, if you look at the time on there, depending on when you call a loan officer, you're going to get different rates. So when you ask the question, what is the bond market price and coupon that this rate is attached to? So that if you call me at 10 o'clock and you call someone else at 1 o'clock, you're actually getting a chance to compare apples to apples. But the higher that number, the lower the rate. So the markets, if you can see, since July, have rebounded significantly. And this is huge because we're continuing to trend. If you look at the trend, it's an upward trend, which means rates are coming down. And this is awesome. It's never a straight line. That's why there's some vacillation, but it's important to watch the trend so you know what's going on so you can plan accordingly, because you don't want to react to the market. You want to be proactive and have a plan with your loan officer. Whether you use me or not, this live is meant to help you have information to take back to your current loan officer and ask them questions. So one of the questions, if you haven't locked yet, is what is our rate lock strategy getting ahead of the Fed's fund rate decision on the 18th? Speculation, they're going to cut 25 basis points. Some think 50. I'm hoping for 50, but this is why it's important to have these conversations ahead, because luck is the intersection between preparation and opportunity. So let's make sure that you look lucky when you lock, because you've actually been prepared. And when that moment comes, you're ready to pull the trigger. So I just want to make sure I educate clients and people who watch my live so they know the questions asked. Because if you've never bought a home before, you might not know the questions to ask a loan officer. And this can really help differentiate between different loan officers. When you ask them the question, what bond market price and what coupon is this rate attached to? If they look like they just got like cleaning their room or don't know what you're asking, that's a good sign that maybe you're not working with the right loan officer. But if you look at the chart above, the UMBS 30-year 5.5%, the bond market price is 101.57. This is the key indicators. You want to make sure you're giving everyone you're working with a fair shot. Part of that is knowing the questions to ask. Let me show you the next chart, because I want to show you how much it's recovered. Since July, you can see how far down it was to where it is now. Let me show you how far we've recovered since last October, because that's even more jarring. This is why talking with people and planning is so important, because there's certain aspects that come into play when you're looking at managing your equity position and when is the right time to buy. And so keep in mind, every 1 point drop in rate brings another 2 to 3 million buyers back to the market, which increases prices, right? But right now it's an interesting time because there's still some questions out there. Is it going to rebound? Is it not? So I've been able to see a lot of my clients end up getting huge amounts of seller credits back. And when you couple that with a down payment and closing cost assistance program, they're actually getting checks back at closing. This is huge. So let me show you the next chart. So I wanted to show you from Freddie Mac's website, because you can go there and look at the interest rates, right? Back in October of last year, interest rates were near 8%. And this is prime rate. So you got to think, if you weren't sitting in prime position, you're probably getting higher. So about 8%. And now they're all the way down into the very low sixes. And if you go FHA, they're in the high fives, depending on your situation. But this is a massive amount of improvement. And this is why a lot of people are picking up the excitement for what's coming. Because yes, home prices are up. They're only going to continue to go up. But as rates come down, it makes home affordability that much more achievable. So let me show you some more. This is what interest rates have done since 1971. This is important to know because the slide I'm going to show next is a home price appreciation data. It's not super sexy info, but this is huge as a consumer. And I like to give this information out so you can plan accordingly. Because one of the key pillars to building long-term generational wealth is home ownership. And I'm going to show why. But look at the interest rates. Keep in mind when we look at this slide, I'm going to post next. Interest rates in the 80s were near 20%, even for prime. And so when I show you the next slide, you're going to see the big gray columns. That's recession indicators. Those are times of recession. So you can see what rates did during those periods of time and what home price appreciation, which I'm about to show you. Oh, not stickers, background, please. All right. So I'll move out the way again so you can screenshot this. It's home price appreciation data since 1942. This is huge because keep in mind, remember back in the 80s, what I told you guys to remember? Interest rates were near 20%. But what did home prices do? Continue to appreciate throughout the entire decade. We had a little drop in 1990, but we're going to go into that small little dip of recession. And then homes were flat in 1991. But home prices did drop in 2007 through 11. And that's where most people are afraid. They're afraid of that moment ever happening again. But if they studied history, I'll show you why that isn't going to happen and why it's important to bring this kind of information to you, because keep in mind who profits from our fear. When people are spreading false information like home prices are going to drop, this is going to be horrible, who profits from that? When we see last year and in the recent years that private equity are buying up 30 and 40% of the homes that hit the market, those same companies, when you look at who owns them, BlackRock and all these other huge private equity firms, also own the media companies. And if they have intentions to buy 30 to 40% of the inventory by 2030, of course they don't want regular people buying homes because they want to corner the market. Because look at these gains. And you have to keep in mind, this is off the value of the property. So if you buy a $300,000 property, say in 2020, and that home went up 10%, that home now is worth $330,000. So you made $30,000. Now, when you're buying an investment property, you have to put 20% down, right? So 20% down of 300,000, 60 grand. But if you made $30,000 in that 1 year, you made 50% return on your cash on cash investment. Most of us want to see a 10% return when we buy stock, right? You buy stock, you get a 10% return, which is index average for the last 30 years, right? Index funds. Well, if you do $10,000 worth of stock, and let's hypothetical, you get 10% return, that's $1,000 for the year. If you use 10 grand to get into a house like a normal consumer and it goes up 10%, that means that $300,000, 30 grand, you just made like 300% return on your investment. That's money. And that's why I say it's one of the key pillars to building long-term generational wealth, and why I like to share this information to empower you, because some people are like, man, I just keep falling farther and farther behind. This is by design because they want to control you. Because if you're growing equity and net worth, you have power. And that terrifies the power structures in place, because then they have less control. And that's sad, but that's where us loan officers, because there's lots of good ones on this app. Cat Loans, one of my favorites. Go follow her. Carlos Munoz. There's tons of us that are out here trying to share information because it doesn't take a lot of money out of pocket. As I go to the next slide, thank you everyone who's joining. It means a lot to me. Put in the comments what you think you need as a down payment to get into your home. But I'm going to go to the next slide, but just screenshot this if you haven't. That's home price appreciation data. You can aggregate it yourself at BLS and Case-Shiller. It's amazing. Let's go to the next slide. This is why this will never happen again, because we study facts and data here. And so look at this. And Jubin, I'll give you that answer here in a second after I cover this slide. So this is birthing rates for each generation, baby boomers to Gen X, there's a huge decline in birthing rates. Then you go to the millennials, we have an increase, right? But look at the bottom graphs. That's showing you home formations, which is people entering the housing market, either through divorce, the age of leaving the home, which is typically the age of about 33. So if you project out from 1973, 33 years out, 2006, well, what happened in 2006 and 7? The most amount of homes completed with a huge drop in housing formations, but they didn't curtail the completions. Look how much completions outpaced formations for that entire time period that home prices dropped. It's important to follow this stuff because look what happened since 2014, 2015. It flipped. So this is important. This is why we need to understand this, that we have a housing shortage, and it's why home prices continue to go up. And then you couple that with private equity buying up inventory. Normal first-time homebuyers are in their home 3 to 6 years, and then that home comes back to the market. But when they're owning homes, they're holding it, and so that doesn't come back to the market. So not only are we not building enough, private equity has now controlled a lot of the release of property back to the inventory market through holding because they get paid for renting the property out, which helps them control the markets. But let me go ahead and answer the previous question, and then I'll answer yours. How do you get into lending? Okay, so that's a Jubin. So that's a great question. Thank you for asking it. Depends. There's a great online school that I used to get my license 10 years ago. It's called Cape School. It's out of Florida, and you find whatever state you're in, you'll go on, get your MLO license, test preparation. It's like 28, 24-hour course, depending on what state you're in. You take the test, you go through, pass it. There's a lot of background check stuff that you got to go into, but a lot of good places to start as a loan officer. Like I didn't start as a loan officer. I started in this business as my branch manager's loan partner. So that meant like I helped with apps and learned the business, but I got licensed right away. But I worked my way up to the operations manager of the entire division, then went on my own self-source about 5 years ago. And so there's a path, but if you are interested, 100% shoot me a DM and I'll send you the link for Cape School. Look into it. And there's great companies out there that have great training programs. I'd love to help you get into this business because we need as many voices out here helping the community get into properties so that they can build their long-term generational wealth and not just focus on investors. So absolutely. So NA, let's look at it. 30. Yeah, exactly. Isn't that crazy? Let's see. So 6.639, none, it's 97. My lender asked me to lock, closing date 6/24. Makes sense because when you lock, you have to send a revised loan estimate. And so when you're looking at timing for closing, depending on if a CD has been sent, most of the time if you haven't locked yet, a CD hasn't gone out. So when you lock, you have to send a revised loan estimate, which means after that you can't close for 4 days. So they're probably trying to get you to lock now so that you can stay within your timeline for closing turn times for each department. And so I would lock now, absolutely. If you were my client, I'd be suggesting to lock ahead of that because what's more important is getting a smooth and on-time closing. You got to remember each department has different functions, right? On average, in every closing, in every transaction, there's 8 companies and 32 people involved. And you're under a contractual obligation to honor your part of that, and that is to close. So what you really need to do is make sure that you do your best to honor those timelines. So most underwriting is 48 to 72 hours, but get with your loan officer to find out the turn time schedule based on your current situation to make sure that you don't put everyone in a logjam and yourself because it can be stressful, and go from there. And most companies have a float down, but there probably won't be that much of a rebound compared to now than on Wednesday. It's just preparation because as we go into November and October and the future months, people were getting ready. Let's see. Bought my first house at the end of 2022 and refinanced a month ago, 6.125. Awesome. Your home probably went up significantly. I'm not sure where you're at. And you refinance at 6.125. That's great. I wouldn't try to, depending on how long you plan to own your home, it would be if it makes sense to refinance later next year. But you don't want to churn your loan because then you're just, in essence, adding more and more fees and robbing your equity position. But just making sure that you know that you're in a good position. What if rates lower down? She told me 3 days before closing. So rate you can, in essence, if you've already sent the rate lock LE and do you can renegotiate the lock, but absolutely go back and check with her, because if you lock 3 days before closing, you have to send depending on if they send a CD. Some companies won't send a CD unless you lock, but I would double check and confirm that locking 3 days won't delay your closing by a day, because from my experience, we don't send a CD until it's locked. We send loan estimates, but typically how it's done is like we'll send a rate lock loan estimate to make sure that we stay within turn times. Gotcha. So that's where you can potentially do a float down, and then they can just send a revised CD. So that's a great opportunity there. We were getting 5.3. That's great. Yeah, fantastic. Depending on where some states have different what they're called LLPAs, loan level price adjustments. So that could be part of it. Different credit profiles, different loan structures, occupancy type can really impact your rates. So sometimes somebody might be getting a 5.3, but that might be different loan structures, different programs, and different locations. Some people didn't know that different states and different areas have different loan level price adjustments, but the chart can be found on the Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae's website. Same thing with Ginnie, like FHA deals. You can find their loan level price adjustments in there. But yeah, Cape School, just like that, spelled Jubbin. You can Google it, find out, you go to your state, you get licensed, you go through the training. It's really important information. But yeah, feel free to DM me. I'm serious. I love helping new loan officers get started and also have resources, because there's ways to speed up your efficacy without having to get your butt beat for years in this business, and or feeling the urge to have to overspend on expensive coaching. So let me know. I'm happy to help in any way I can and be a resource for you, because this business is small. Should rates be lower than 6% after 18? Potentially. Right now we're in the very, very low sixes as it sits, depending on your situation. That's prime rates. And so as we go into the fourth quarter and into the first quarter of next year, it really depends on the 10-year Treasury yield and the Fed fund rate and what the Fed announces on the 18th when they're talking about their projection. So it's volatile, but for all intents and purposes, we're seeing the trajectory. It should be able to come down into that range, maybe even lower, but you can always refinance later. So don't be afraid of that. But you don't want to, like I said earlier, churn your loan. And I've heard a lot of big investors are dumping their portfolio. Like, when I'm talking big investors, I'm talking like BlackRock that have bought, and those big equity firms that bought up 30 and 40% of the inventory in areas, thousands, billions of dollars in inventory. And they're not dumping their properties, they're holding their properties right now. Now, other investors that might have bought and sold, if they're dumping now, please tell me where, because I would love the opportunity to tell my clients so they can eat up that inventory, because inventory is such an issue right now. Yeah, and those are monster companies. It's insane. It's disgusting, actually. When you go in to actually look at what companies they own, I do not know how it's legal that they're able to do this, especially when you look at different competitive factors in a market, because those hedge fund companies own the banks. So whose money are they lending to themselves to collect money from regular people to then be able to write off the vacancy if there is any vacancy and any updates? It's a crazy, crazy thing. It's insane. But different REITs are doing different things. They have, if it's a REIT setup, they might have obligations to their shareholders, and a lot of it is based on a profit model. But feel free to share where they're dumping the property so we can tell the other agents that are in this chat so they can go and tell their clients, because there's just not enough inventory in most states. But yeah, I'd love to continue answering questions. And again, this is important. So you look at the data, housing formations versus completions. This is important because this leads to inventory. And what's great is you can look up the data on BLS about housing permits and starts, because permits will show you how many permits are being filed for single family residences and also multifamily. But let's focus on single family, because that's really what we're here to talk about. And also completions, because a lot of times if it's a new build community, those homes are already pre-sold. So they're not actual homes coming to the market. It's already been sold, but they are factored into the completions. But go in and look at it, and it's so amazing what will happen at BRICS. BRICS will never take over, because the countries that are involved in BRICS are, there's several great books. One of them by Ray Dalio. It's the Principles for Dealing with a Falling Nation, Principles for Dealing with the Changing World Order. It's important to understand the economic situations for those countries in BRICS and understand that their economies, it doesn't have enough money to sustain their economy. So like Russia, China, their countries are too big to sustain. And so to be able to compete with the American dollar will never happen. It's just a marketing scam that I think Russia's been doing on Twitter and different chat forums to try to destabilize, but BRICS will never be anything. And a lot of people were like, oh, wait, BRICS is going to change the dollar and it's going to be an impact. And it really hasn't. And I think that was just a disinformation campaign that was started online. But again, it's never going to take over. It's unfortunate because the way the United States negotiated it after World War II, it as a power structure and just how much command we have over the global economy, which I don't think is fair. I also think that the global economy in itself needs to be restructured in a way because with how much wealth there is in our world, there's no excuse for anyone to be poor. There's no excuse for anyone to be hungry or without medical or without education. But when you see some of these things across different spectrums, different countries around the world, United States included, it's embarrassing that our elected officials continue to give themselves raises to their salary and they have their health care covered and all these other things. But Americans haven't seen a increase in the minimum wage in forever. They haven't seen their health care isn't covered and they don't get retirement for the rest of their life. And they're actually going after Social Security. So there's a lot of things that do need to change. But unfortunately, for those who are hoping on BRICS being a thing, it just won't ever happen. Plus, the relationships between those countries independently and intricately are just too unstable. Plus, dependency on oil is not a sustainable future model, as we all know with global warming that's happening. So just everything in general revolving around that is going to be something that is not going to sustain a long-term any momentum because of what the countries involved, the lack of stability in those countries, and the lack of stability in what they are basing the currency on. But that's a lot of information. Let me go ahead and pull this next one up. I already showed you this, but I've showed this, but I'll go over it in a little bit more detail. So 2007, most homes ever built, 4 million homes available. Keep in mind, there's 11 million more buyers in the market right now. And at the end of 2023, there's a little over a million homes. Still right now, there's only a little over a million homes available for 11 million more buyers. So when you keep in mind all of the appreciation, inventory, this is a recipe for home prices to continue to go up. And when rates drop even further, people that felt trapped in their homes because of low rates are now going to be able to sell. And there's so much equity in homes, they're going to be able to compete with cash. And so that's going to, again, be like what we saw in 2020, 2021, and even a little in 2022, people paying over list. So 50, 70, 80,000 over list for some house. I saw one back in 2021 that was like 150 or almost 200,000 over list price that they paid, all cash. So it's going to be fun, but that doesn't mean there isn't opportunities. And like I was sharing earlier, if you use down payment and closing cost assistance, you can get into a home for very little out of pocket, even getting a check back at closing. Let me take this green screen off and answer questions. Oh, sorry. I take that back. This is the last thing I want to cover on this live today for slides. With rates coming down and everything, the market is going to be flooded with these creepy companies that buy data from the credit bureaus. They sell our public data to companies that are mortgage companies that don't have relationships. And so I like to share this with everybody to get ahead of it. How many of you get junk mailers, junk calls, junk spam, all this stuff? Well, this right here, this little sucker will help you. Optoutprescreen.com. You can opt out of electronic stuff. And also if you mail in the form, you can opt out of mailing marketing advertisement stuff. It's crazy as a loan officer. When we pull credit, we don't sell the data, but the credit companies will send what's called a trigger lead to all these companies that do pay for it. So like online lender 123 who doesn't have relationships but pay for this trigger lead data. They're gonna be like, hey, we saw that you had your credit pulled and we want to give you a quote. First of all, that's creepy. Like as a consumer, I don't want a stranger calling me because they paid for my data from the credit company. Now they don't have the intricacies of your application. They just know that you applied. And so that's the part that gets really crazy. And I feel like that practice should be illegal. I do not think we should have our data so ready for companies. And we wonder why data leaks happen all the time. It's because there's so many companies behind the scenes that are buying data. Who's really truly protecting or monitoring the fact that who are you selling this to? Equifax, TransUnion, Experian, all these people. How do you know for sure that these people aren't going to sell that to some other nefarious company? But I digress. This is just something I like to share. Go to optoutprescreen.com. You can opt out of these harassing marketing stuff, both electronically and by mail. Super awesome. But I did it. I don't get any junk mail anymore. If you have any questions, go ahead and put it in the comments. Happy to answer. Again, market's doing really well. September 18th, the Fed's going to make their decision to cut the Fed fund rate, which is going to be awesome. And it's going to be impactful. We're going to see the rates rebound some. Now, will it rebound significantly between today and tomorrow? Maybe, maybe not. But that's where we want to have that conversation and be proactively prepared to take advantages of the market. Also, this is important for realtors and lenders who are on this live to know what to call their clients, especially if they've been on the fence. Hey, client, I know you've been on the fence about buying. Where do rates need to be for you to feel comfortable and confident with your decision to move forward in the home buying process? If they tell you 4 or 5, whatever the number is, great. Let me put some information together for you and send that over to you so that you can review. And let's see if now might be an opportunity to get back in the market, potentially close you before the end of the year so that you can take advantage of this year's purchase on your taxes when you file in 2025. So boom, send it to them, because this is what I'll tell you. They tell you 4% rate. There are opportunities for seller funded buy downs, temporary buy downs that can get them into that number, but also help make sure that they're in a position to buy this year, be able to write this off on their taxes for taxes and interest and all this other stuff, but also for them to start building that equity position now so that when they get into 2025, they're able to potentially refinance as rates get lower, but take advantage of that influx in the market. So it's going to be awesome. I had a loan officer who I submitted all my documents, run my credit, but doesn't reply to me. Man, I'm so sorry. That's unfortunate. A lot of lenders are right, especially right now, are freaking busy, but they should have teams and systems and processes to be able to get back with you, or at least some kind of notification. And so I don't know what's going on with that, but I apologize on behalf of all lenders. One of the good questions, this is a good thing for the comments, is to interview the loan officers you decide to work with. Hey, what is your team structure? What are your turn times? If I submit to you documents, how soon should I expect a response from you on those documents? And maybe it's 24, maybe it's 48 hours, but at least that helps reduce stress. And so you can feel confident moving forward. But what I would do is just respond to them with that concern. Be like, hey, especially because your closing is coming up, I would say, hey, in preparation for my closing, I'm getting very anxious. I've submitted everything to you. I've asked questions. Can I please have let's set up a time to speak to reset expectations so that I can go into this with confidence. If they have a calendar service, book yourself some time on it. If not, send that email. Say what time works for you. I've got 12 to 4 available today or tomorrow, whatever, and give them the times to pick from. But remember that we are providing a service to you, and loan officers, if they're worth their weight, they're going to want to make sure they do a great job for you, because our business is referral based. So we want to earn your trust so that we get referrals back. So the lack in communication, there could be some outside circumstances we're not aware of. Maybe they had a sick family member, maybe they traveled, maybe their phone broke. But that's not an excuse, but it is worth vetting to make sure so that you can correct the action or reset expectations. And just remember that you drive this process. There's another loan officer. Actually, I really appreciate you. I love to add value and communicate, because again, we've all been there. There's been times where I got the flu and I couldn't do anything. I was stuck in bed for 2-3 days, and some of my response time slowed down, but thankfully I have a good team behind me that could help step in and respond and take care of things. But it happens. Sometimes stuff goes there. And I just want to make sure that people are aware of it so they can reduce the anxiety. Because buying a house isn't the top 5 most stressful things a person does. And they maybe do it 2 to 3 times their whole life. And you got to keep in mind, when stress happens, cortisol is coming up. It brings up trauma responses, fight or flight. And in those moments, we truly can be reverting back to some of our darker periods of doubt, fear, anxiety, outlash. And I want to help anybody that comes in contact with me reduce that so they can be back into a emotionally regulated state and, be empowered throughout the process. But yeah, that's why I'm on here in live. Whether people use me or not is not the focus. It's more about to empower people to make a buying or refinancing decision, to know the questions to ask, and also why certain questions are being asked. Because it can be intimidating. Like, why do you need my bank statements? Why do you need to know my employment history? Why do you need to know my residential history? Why do you need this? Why are you worried about this deposit? And some loan officers don't handle that proactively. For instance, like if me and my team, if we're asking for bank statements, we're going to say, hey, we're going to need 60 days worth of your bank statements. What we're looking at here is to be able to see where you're at, to source your funds for close, to identify if there's any large deposits that we need to address before it goes to underwriting so that you have a smooth underwriting process. So now when you know that, and what I'll say is large deposit for you is X, because depending on your loan program that you're going with, large deposits are viewed differently. And so we'll go ahead and do that extra step to notify what a large deposit is and what we will do to document the large deposit. So it's not anxiety, because if you don't know what a large deposit is, but great, I don't even know what a large deposit is. Now here I am, got to source it. And what does sourcing a large deposit look like? I don't like surprises personally, so I don't like my clients to ever be surprised by what we ask for. But that's why I do these things, so that people can have these conversations with the loan officers they're working with. And for people that join late, I always post these back to my YouTube channel so that you can go back and re-listen to it or pull it up at any point in time. But it's important. This stuff is huge. And if I could go back in time, I've shared this several times on my lives as well. I would have bought property way earlier in my life. I would have bought things that I could have comfortably afforded. But if I could go back in time, I'm going to say this on this live because I think it's worth repeating. I would have bought a fourplex or duplex as soon as I could, 2021, as early as possible. Lived in one side, rented the other, stay in it 12 months, then buy another one as a primary, get a lease agreement, and then buy another duplex or fourplex and do that every 12 months. Just upgrading my properties and holding those properties. And by the time I'm 41 now, by the time where I'm at now, I could have freaking 10 to 20 properties under management. If they're duplex and fourplexes, now we could be sitting with 80 doors without ever having to put 20% down. And with down payment and closing cost assistance programs, you don't have to be a first-time home buyer. So I could have been doing all this since back then with $3 to $5 grand out of my pocket, maybe getting that back with seller concessions. And so it's like, if I only knew what I knew now back then, I'd be stupid rich. And so I'm like, I can't change the past, but I can help change a lot of people's future by sharing the information from my lived experience. This isn't just some dude talking about mortgage. I own multiple properties. I've sold multiple properties, and I know the benefits of home ownership, and I study this shit. And so it's important to share, and buy is what you can comfortably afford right now. Hold it and review what your long-term goals are. Work with a financial advisor. And most people don't think they can work with a financial advisor until they have certain amounts of money saved. But if you don't know how to save that proactively, or know what to invest in, or how to properly structure your money, how are you ever going to get there? So you need a plan. So if you can't interview financial planners as well. But it's another topic for another day. Anybody who has questions, go ahead and put in the comments. I'm Ron Toy with the Ron Toy team at Cross Country Mortgage. I'm a licensed residential mortgage loan officer here in Texas. Been helping families for over 10 years. I've helped about 2,000 with their home investment journey, and it is an honor, and I love it. And I'm here to answer questions, whether if you're an owner, a renter, your investor, or a realtor, lender, anybody. Shoot them in the comments. If not, no worries. I'm going to do these lives more frequently, especially as we have huge reports coming up, like on Wednesday and throughout the rest of the week. This is going to be a very busy week. Now, I don't usually stay on here very long because it's more just like little quick tips, little quick lives. So feel free to share it, let your friends know, plan on it, but I'm happy to help. If nobody has any questions, I'm going to go ahead and get off, but I'll wait a second to see if anyone's got any additional questions. Appreciate you asking those questions. I hope that things get better. Reach out to your loan officer and, let them know your concern, but come from it with a position of they, in essence, work for you and you want to build that relationship. If you don't have trust, your closing is really quick. So I would just try to help you close with your current loan officer, but then understand that you need to interview some more for your next investment, because it sounds like that person might be having an issue or doesn't align with your current long-term financial goals. And your loan officer needs to be a relationship because, again, if you align with the right one, they're going to help make sure that you properly leverage your equity positions to maximize your long-term and short-term goals and don't run into any issues. They'll be able to help you with your property taxes and let you know of what changes are coming in the market to get ahead of things. So that relationship is so important. Like I would have a good relationship with a lawyer, a loan officer slash banker, and financial advisor. And subcategory under financial advisor, a tax professional. That'll help make sure that you're set up for long-term success. Yeah, if you have any questions, put them in the comments. If not, I'm about to leave. But long story short, for this live, market's rebounding, rates are coming down. It's an amazing opportunity to buy what you can comfortably afford. Don't try to flex or impress neighbors who don't really care or don't pay your bills because that old mindset of keeping up with the Joneses is antiquated and it was based on a system that only helped benefit the 1%. And let's not go ahead and do anything for them anymore. They get enough handouts from us. 100 billion years in corporate subsidies. Let's get ourselves taken care of, build our long-term generational wealth. Because if you are renting, you are paying a mortgage. It's just not your own. So let's go ahead and make sure you are set up for success. See you tomorrow.